This is chapter 10, which discusses what are the pricing strategies for firms that have market power. If you remember, market power means the firms have a downward sloping demand curve, very different than perfect competition, and we're going to worry about those differences. Do firms want the deadweight loss that results from a downward sloping demand curve and charging all consumers the same price? And the answer is no. There's lost opportunities for profit from the firms. So the firms are trying to do two things. One is they're trying to make their demand curve more inelastic, so have a bigger slope, because that means they can charge higher prices. And the firms want to create opportunities to do price discrimination. That means charging different consumers a different price so they can get more profit. Now, price discrimination is totally legal, and you see it all the time. Price discrimination means you charge different consumers different prices. So airlines are famous. If you've ever flown, you very likely paid a different price than everybody else on the airplane. Whenever you go and you get a student discount, that's a form of price discrimination. Senior citizen discounts might matter for some of us, and that's a different form of price discrimination. These are all legal as long as you don't do them by the protected categories like race, ethnicity, national origin. Although it's interesting, even under gender and age, there's reasons why firms might want to charge different genders different prices or different ages different prices. And so the law here gets complicated in a short amount of time. If you're a firm and you have perfect information about your consumers and you know exactly how much you're willing to pay, what price would you charge them? And the answer is the highest price possible, and therefore you'd be pricing right along the demand curve. If you could price right along the demand curve, that's called perfect price discrimination, and that's the first example that the book talks about. That means the firm would get all the gains from trade and the consumers would have none of them. Clearly that'd be a good profit opportunity. Again, as we talked about in the last chapter, entry is really important as to what the consequences are for that kind of behavior. Where would the firm set output? They would set output where where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. But since you charged every consumer a different price, that's also where price equals marginal cost, there'd be no deadweight losses. All the gains from trade would occur, except the firm would get them all. So that's one extreme. The other extreme is in perfect competition, where price equals marginal revenue, then equals marginal cost by the firms, but the consumer surplus goes to the consumers. So then the book starts talking about other forms of price discrimination. So the price along the demand curve was perfect price discrimination. And so there's a lot of other forms of price discrimination. So the one they talk about is called segmenting, which means can you segment the market? So for example, if there's student discounts, it says the students get a different price than the non-students. That creates an incentive for false student ID cards. And so the question is, what are the gains compared to the losses of that? Segmenting might come from geography. The book talks about how cars in one country have different prices than cars in other countries. So again, being an expert in the price elasticity of demand is crucial. If consumers are more price inelastic, that means they're not very responsive to price, the firms are naturally going to want to charge a higher price. If you're an expert at determining marginal revenue, that'll tell you something about the difference between marginal revenue and price, which also has consequences for how big are the deadweight losses. Couponing is another way where firms try to segment the market. So if they send you coupons in the mail, there's a interesting law case in the book about that a consumer found out that some people got different coupons than others, and they tried to claim that that was an illegal form of discrimination. It was clearly an attempt to do price discrimination by the firm. Another form of price discrimination is by bundling. And bundling can happen in several ways. They actually talk about block bundling, which is if you buy more, maybe you get a lower price each. So the minimum purchase is X. But bundling can also be if you buy this good, then you get a discount on buying this other good. Here is where the book actually misses an opportunity to show the incentives for doing that using indifference curves, which we're going to do in class. So we're going to remember that utility is what lies behind all of these strategies. The final strategy that the book talks about is two-part tariffs. So gyms do this, right? You have to pay to join the gym, and then you might pay per time or per month after that. All of these strategies are ways that firms try to make more money. If there's free entry, in the end, the profits are going to be dissipated. They'll all be normal profits, not economic profits. And these are various strategies by which both firms try to create inelastic demand curves, so that can cause deadweight loss. But at the same time, firms try to exploit all those potential gains from trade, and then they're doing pretty well for the economy. So in some sense, this is the realism chapter, because we know perfect competition is extreme, but monopoly is extreme also. And so this is a great chapter to understand our economy and to develop your tools about thinking about the consequences of how the economy works.